Walkability. What is it about walking that has made walkability so important? After all, I always thought that my car was the best way of cruising around. Well, before everyone had cars, walking was not an issue. We lived close to our work. Our cities and our towns were a hodgepodge of industry, commerce and residential activity. We walked to work, we walked to school, and as our cities expanded, we walked to the trains and the trams that took us to work. We walked to the shops, and because we couldn't carry too much, we walked to and fro frequently, getting lots of exercise. But then, as planning controls became more prevalent, we separated residential living from work activity, partly to protect our homes from those dirty, noisy, polluting industries. We did it to provide healthier environments to raise our families. Ironically, the consequences of this are now one of the key drivers in the adverse health issues faced by Victorians. Our lifestyles are just too lazy to maintain a healthy body. We drive to work, and when we get there, more and more of us just sit on our backsides, as yesterday's physical labour and manufacturing jobs give way to digital commerce. We sit at desks, punching keypads, rather than moving around with widgets and spanners. We then drive home and de-stress in front of a TV screen. We fill our car boots with shopping as we drive to the big suburban shopping centres. We just don't get enough physical activity. Unfortunately, it's our health, the very thing that we thought we were protecting, that's suffering. We're getting fatter and less active, which increases our risk to health problems like type 2 diabetes. Did you know that if you sit at your desk for more than 6 hours a day, you have just doubled your risk of heart disease? Our children are not getting enough exercise, which is giving rise to obesity, diabetes, and heart disease, and poor health habits from a young age. As the population of Melbourne continues to grow, our cities have expanded ever further outwards, so that Melbourne is now one of the largest cities in the world. But, as we have expanded, the roads, the trains and the trams are struggling to transport all of those people into the centres where the jobs are. It's not unusual to hear of people spending hours commuting from the outer suburbs to the city every day. There's now a real risk that we are creating dysfunctional communities as the population expands to the car-dependent outer suburbs. Our cars, the very thing that gave us our freedom, are now presenting one of our greatest challenges. Greenhouse gas emission and climate change are a real problem, and our love affair with the motor car is partly to blame. Can we make a difference? Can we change the trend? Yes, it's called walkability. Making our communities walkable, walkable to work, or to the trains and the trams that take us to work, walkable to the shops, walkable to school, sports, entertainment, walking for the pleasure of walking, walking because I can, not because I have to, not because I ought to, but because I want to. Health researchers in the Mackay Centre have found that the first 30 minutes of exercise is the most important, and people who catch public transport can get 30 minutes without trying. Therefore, one way of helping people to start walking is to make it more attractive for them to walk and catch public transport. So what makes your neighbourhood walkable? We suggest there are 4 things that you need to know in order to understand how walkable your neighbourhood is. We'll briefly explain these now, and then afterwards in the working groups we'll explore them in more detail. Firstly, you need spaces and places where you can walk. This is the tracks, the paths, the streets, parks and beaches where walking is enabled. The more interconnected and permeable an area is to walking, the more likely people are to walk. Conversely, big blocks with no cut-throughs, wide, high-speed roads with few opportunities for pedestrian crossings make an area impermeable for walking. Secondly, you need the intent to walk, the motivation to leave the car at home, to get off the couch and walk. Researchers generally divide the intent to walk into two types: walking as a means of transport to get somewhere, for example, school, shops, train station, coffee shop, or the pub. Secondly, as a form of recreation. This ranges from walking with no specific purpose at all, other than just walking. Just being in the place. Walking for leisure. Taking the dog for a walk. Or walking for exercise to keep fit. Thirdly, we also suspect that the journey is important. However, research to prove just how important the journey is rather scant. This is because measuring the things that are important to the journey, like safety or shade, amenity along the route, are much more difficult. Dr. Ben Rossiter from Victoria Walks suggests that for recreational walking, it's what happens around the footpath, rather than the footpath itself, that's important. For example, the opportunity to stop, play ball, watch a view, have a coffee, etc. are all key attributes that make the walkability of a neighbourhood better. Finally, it's the people who live in the area, the people that will do the walking. Walkability is impacted by the number of people that live in the area and their demographic profile. In general, the denser the population, the greater the probability that the people will walk. The more people that are out and about walking on the streets, the more it seems to attract others to walk. In effect, walkers attract walkers. Therefore, measuring the level of actual walking can be an important part of your journey towards building more walkable communities, as it informs council of the progress they are making. So, what do we hope to achieve? Firstly, we need to recognise the importance of walking as an essential step in the restoration of a healthy society. The consequences of not doing this are an unsustainable growth in healthcare treatment costs. This is not just a state and federal problem. It has significant impacts upon councils, as they deliver much of the community infrastructure and on-the-ground services that have to look after a less healthy society. Secondly, we need to recognise walking as a legitimate mode of transport, alongside all of the other road and street users. Historically, walking has been viewed as peripheral to the decision-making process about transport infrastructure. It was often treated as an afterthought. However, walking and places for people has to become central to our decision-making process. Thirdly, we need to start investing in building walkable communities with a level of investment that is commensurate with the priority we give to it. If we determine that certain routes form a priority pedestrian network, then we need to prioritise the investment and design effort to make them walkable. This is a major cultural shift. We've become so wedded to our cars that any change in priority is often perceived as a threat to our mobility and freedom. The truth is far from it. Walkability will vastly improve the livability of your neighbourhood. It's even been shown to increase the value of your home and the level of trade in the high street. In order to bring our communities along the journey, we will need to tell our story. In the rest of this workshop, we will explore how we can better tell these stories, how we can consistently collect, record, store, maintain, and publish the data and evidence needed to back up these stories. Getting this right is a key step in building healthier, more livable, and more prosperous communities. Thank you.